It was a calm and bright morning at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The air was cool, and the wind gently moved the flags that surrounded the white marble tomb. People from different places had gathered quietly, watching the ceremony. Cameras clicked softly, children stood still, and everyone's eyes followed the guard on duty. His name was Sergeant Miller. Miller had served as a tomb guard for years. Every movement he made was practiced and perfect. His shoes shined like glass, his rifle gleamed, and his face showed no emotion. He walked 21 steps one way, paused 21 seconds, then turned sharply to walk back. It was a symbol of respect and perfection, something the tomb guards lived for. The crowd admired his discipline. Many had seen videos of the guards online, but seeing it in real life was different. There was a deep silence around the place, a kind of silence that made people think about sacrifice and honor. Even the birds nearby seemed quiet. In the crowd stood a man wearing a worn brown jacket and a cap pulled low over his face. His name was Daniel. He had arrived early, keeping to himself, avoiding eye contact. There was something uneasy about him, something that made a few people step a little farther away. He looked around often, his fingers twitching in his pockets. Daniel wasn't a regular visitor. Unknown to everyone there, he was a wanted fugitive. His picture had been on the news for days. He had been running for a week, hiding from the police. But that morning, something pulled him toward Arlington. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe he just wanted to stand in a place where honor still meant something. Miller noticed him. A guard's eyes are always moving, always aware. He didn't react, but something in his gut told him to stay alert. The man's stance, his nervous movements, it wasn't normal. Still, Miller continued his duty without a single break in formation. Daniel's breathing grew heavier. He kept looking behind him, as if expecting someone to appear. In his mind, he could already hear sirens, though there were none yet. His heart pounded so hard that he could feel it in his throat. He didn't know why he came here. Maybe he thought the military men would understand him. Maybe he just wanted someone to listen. But his fear was stronger than his reason. The quiet ceremony continued. Miller turned with precision, his rifle tight against his shoulder. His boots clicked sharply on the marble. Each step echoed with control. But as he faced the crowd again, Daniel stepped forward. He crossed the small rope barrier that separated the visitors from the guard's path. There was an instant murmur in the audience. Cameras lowered. People looked confused. Miller stopped mid-step, his eyes locking on the man. He took one measured step forward and spoke, his voice firm but not loud. "Sir, please return behind the line." Daniel didn't move. He stared at Miller like a man trapped in a nightmare. The sound of his breathing filled his own ears. Then, without warning, he reached into his jacket. Some thought he was pulling out a paper or phone. But when he raised his hand, it wasn't a paper, it was a small black gun. Gasps filled the air. Parents grabbed their children. Some dropped to the ground. Others froze, too shocked to move. The air turned heavy in an instant. Yet Miller did not flinch. He didn't shout. He didn't draw his weapon. His voice came out steady, calm, controlled. "Sir, put the weapon down." Daniel's hand trembled. His face was pale, his eyes full of panic. "Don't come near me," he shouted. His voice cracked, echoing through the open space. "You don't understand. They're after me." Miller didn't move from his post. His stance was perfect, his rifle still in his hands, pointed down. But his mind worked quickly. He had faced storms, thunder, and even threats before, but this was different. This was a human moment, full of fear and confusion. He could see that the man's finger was shaking on the trigger. One wrong move could make everything collapse. Behind the guard line, another tomb guard noticed the danger. Without sound, he moved carefully along the wall, signaling others. Security began closing in quietly, but Miller knew that one sudden movement might make the man panic. So he kept his eyes steady on him. "Sir," Miller said again, his voice deep and calm. "You're standing on sacred ground. No one will hurt you. Put the gun down." Daniel shook his head. "You don't know what they'll do to me," he whispered. He looked around wildly, sweat dripping from his forehead. He saw the crowd staring, cameras pointing, police already being called. They'll shoot me. They'll shoot me like a dog. No one will hurt you here, Miller said. His tone never changed. It was strong but calm, the kind of voice that could cut through noise and panic. The crowd held its breath. No one dared move. Time felt frozen. Even the flags seemed still. A voice from the side whispered, "That's the man from the news." A few people started recording, but most stayed silent. The tension grew heavier. Daniel took a small step backward, his hand shaking more violently. Miller knew he had to keep him focused on him, not on the crowd, not on fear. "Look at me," Miller said quietly. "Don't look at them, just me. I'm not your enemy." Daniel's eyes darted between Miller and the crowd. He was sweating heavily now, his breath short and fast. He looked like a man about to break apart. His voice came out small. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." Miller nodded slightly, not breaking eye contact. "Then stop it now. You can end it. You can walk away from this without anyone getting hurt." Daniel blinked, confused. "Walk away?" he asked, almost like a child. "They won't let me. They'll take me back." "Maybe," Miller said softly, "but at least you'll be alive. You can make things right. It's not too late." The crowd could hear his words, but no one dared interrupt. The guard's tone was not commanding now, it was understanding. Every sentence carried weight, calm, and something human. For a second, Daniel's hand lowered just a little. Then he heard a faint siren in the distance. It wasn't close, but it was enough. His fear came rushing back. "They're coming. I knew it," he yelled, lifting the gun again. Miller didn't react, even as the crowd gasped again. His expression didn't change. His heart was steady. "They're not coming for you to hurt you," he said. "They're coming to help. You can still choose what happens next." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. His whole body shook. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he whispered again. His voice cracked and broke into sobs. He looked lost, like a man who had been running for too long. "You don't have to hurt anyone," Miller said softly. "Not today. Not here." The silence stretched again. Every second felt like forever. People prayed silently. Some had tears in their eyes, seeing a guard of steel showing kindness in a moment of danger. Finally, Daniel's arm began to lower. His knees trembled. He looked down at the marble floor, his eyes red and wet. The gun was still in his hand, but his grip weakened. Miller took one careful step closer, his voice never rising. "You're tired, aren't you? You've been running a long time. You can stop now." Daniel nodded slightly, as if realizing he couldn't keep running forever. The sirens were getting closer, the sound echoing through the trees. His shoulders slumped. He looked at the guard standing before him, so calm, so steady, so unafraid, and something in him gave way. He took one deep breath and began to lower his arm completely. His fingers shook as the gun tilted downward. He looked around once more, saw the faces of people watching him, not with anger, but with pity and fear. His lips trembled. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Miller didn't speak for a moment. He only gave a small nod. The air felt lighter, but no one moved yet. Every eye stayed on Daniel's hand. He knelt slowly, his gun still in hand, but pointing toward the ground. Miller stepped closer again, his boots clicking softly on the marble. He stopped a few feet away, not breaking the fragile calm. "You're doing the right thing," he said gently. Daniel let out a shaking breath and set the gun down on the marble. His hands rose slightly in the air, not fully, but enough. The moment the gun touched the ground, Miller took another step forward. He didn't grab him. He didn't shout. He just placed one hand lightly on Daniel's shoulder and said, "It's over now." Daniel started crying quietly, his shoulders shaking. The sirens grew louder. The police were almost there. The crowd stayed frozen, not daring to make a sound. Miller stood beside Daniel, still tall, still calm, his face unreadable. Inside, his heart was pounding, but he didn't let it show. His duty was to protect, but he had done more than that. He had protected life. As the police arrived and began to move in, Miller gave them a quiet nod. He didn't leave his post until Daniel was safely in their hands. Only then did he turn back toward the tomb, lift his rifle again, and return to his silent, steady walk. The people watching that day would never forget it. They had seen courage before, but not like this. It wasn't the kind that came from fighting, it was the kind that came from staying calm when everyone else panicked. The kind that came from peace. And as Miller walked his 21 steps again, the whole place seemed to breathe again. The tomb stood silent, the flag waved softly, and everyone watching knew they had witnessed something rare, real courage, real honor, and the quiet power of one man's calm heart. Police cars came rolling through the gates of Arlington, their blue lights flashing quietly in the distance. The faint echo of sirens faded as they stopped at the edge of the plaza. The officers stepped out quickly but carefully, their movements controlled. The crowd still stood frozen in silence, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. No one dared to whisper. The moment felt heavy, like the air itself carried the weight of what had just happened. Daniel was on his knees, his head bowed and his hands shaking. The gun lay a few feet in front of him on the marble floor. He looked small and broken now. Nothing like the man who had come in shouting and trembling with fear. His breathing was rough, uneven, full of exhaustion. Tears ran down his face, leaving faint lines through the dust on his cheeks. Sergeant Miller stood next to him, his tall figure calm and steady. He had not taken a single step back, not even when the gun had been raised before. His voice had been the only thing that reached through Daniel's panic. Now, as officers moved closer, Miller raised one hand slightly, signaling them to wait. "Easy," he said quietly. "He's surrendering." The lead officer, a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, nodded slowly. He trusted the guard's judgment. They had all seen the way Miller had handled the situation, not with force, but with courage and calm. It was something few could have done under that kind of pressure. Miller looked down at Daniel and spoke softly. "You did the right thing. You stopped before it went too far." Daniel didn't look up. His voice came out low and shaking. "I didn't mean to scare anyone. I just didn't know where to go anymore." "I know," Miller said. "It's over now. You're safe here." When the police finally moved in, Miller stepped aside but stayed close. Two officers gently lifted Daniel by the arms. He didn't fight back. He didn't even look angry. His face showed only deep sadness and relief, like a man who had been carrying a heavy load for too long and had finally let it go. The officers handcuffed him carefully and led him away toward the waiting cars. The crowd parted quietly, giving space. People watched him go, and many of them had tears in their eyes. It wasn't the kind of ending they had expected. There was no shouting, no violence, only a strange, quiet peace. When the car door closed and the police drove off slowly, the plaza fell silent again. The tomb of the unknown soldier stood still, as it always did, untouched by chaos. The guards who had paused returned to their positions. The ceremony resumed as if time had simply paused for a heartbeat and then continued. But for the people there, that moment would never fade. They had seen a man who had almost lost everything, and another man who refused to let fear take control. After the crowd began to leave, a few people approached Sergeant Miller. Some thanked him quietly. A mother with her young son came up and said, "You were so brave, sir. My boy was scared, but you showed him what courage really looks like." Miller nodded politely, his face still calm, and said, "Thank you, Mom." The real bravery is staying calm when it matters. Reporters started gathering near the entrance, cameras flashing from a distance. Word had already spread. Someone had recorded the whole incident on their phone, and within minutes, the video had started circulating online. By evening, millions would see it, the moment a tomb guard faced down a man with a gun and never once raised his voice. That evening, after the area had cleared and the sun dipped below the horizon, Miller stood alone beside the tomb. The plaza was quiet again, the lights casting long shadows over the marble. He looked at the spot where Daniel had stood and sighed quietly. He wasn't thinking about the cameras or the praise people were already giving him. He was thinking about the man who had been desperate enough to bring a gun into a place of peace. The relief in Daniel's eyes when he finally let go of the weapon had stayed in Miller's mind. It reminded him that not every enemy was truly an enemy. Sometimes it was just a lost soul looking for a way out. The next morning, newspapers carried headlines about the event. Tomb Guard shows heroic calm, one said. Gunman surrenders peacefully after powerful stand by Sergeant, read another. Veterans and soldiers across the country began sharing the story, proud of how one of their own had represented what honor and restraint truly meant. Television hosts invited retired officers and military experts to speak about it. One of them said, "You can't teach that kind of composure. That's heart, discipline, and respect all working together. That's what the uniform stands for." But when asked for a statement, Miller gave only a few words. "I was just doing my duty. The tomb is a place of peace, and I wanted to keep it that way." Meanwhile, Daniel's story slowly came out. He wasn't a hardened criminal as people had first assumed. He had been a worker in a small town, wrongly caught in a robbery case. Fear had driven him to run, and guilt had eaten away at him until he couldn't take it anymore. That morning, he had come to the tomb thinking it might be his last stop, a place to end his fear, one way or another. But instead of an end, he had found someone who gave him a second chance inside his holding cell. Daniel sat quietly, staring at the wall. The same calm voice from that day echoed in his head. "You're standing on sacred ground. No one will hurt you." It played over and over, slowly replacing the noise of panic that had filled his mind for days. A few weeks later, he sent a handwritten letter addressed to the Tomb Guard unit. It was short but heartfelt. He thanked them for their patience and courage. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "You didn't just stop me from making a mistake. You reminded me that not all people are out to hurt. Sometimes one calm voice can save a life." The letter reached Miller's hands one morning. He read it silently and then placed it neatly in his drawer, where he kept letters from families of fallen soldiers. To him, this one belonged there too, a reminder that even in moments of fear, compassion had its place. Weeks passed, and the story continued to spread. Tourists visiting Arlington often asked where the event had taken place. Guides would point to the marble path and say softly, "Right there," and not a single step was out of place. One afternoon, a group of young cadets visited for training. Their instructor told them the story, using it as a lesson. "Bravery," he said, "isn't just about facing danger. It's about keeping your heart steady when the world around you is shaking." The cadets stood quietly, understanding that courage wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it was about patience, control, and respect. Miller never sought recognition. He continued his duty every day, his boots clicking in the same rhythm, his rifle shining under the sun. Visitors who had seen the video would sometimes recognize him and whisper, "That's him." But he never looked up. His focus stayed on the tomb, the silent symbol of those who gave everything. On the anniversary of the event, a small crowd gathered quietly near the site. Among them was a man with a simple suit and a tired but peaceful face, Daniel. After serving his time and being cleared of the worst charges, he had started rebuilding his life. He had come to pay his respects. He stood at the back, watching the ceremony in silence. When the guard changed and Miller marched past in his perfect steps, Daniel lowered his head, tears filling his eyes. He whispered softly, "Thank you." He didn't try to talk to Miller. He didn't need to. The respect was enough. The moment was enough. Later, after the ceremony ended, Miller noticed him standing quietly by the fence. Their eyes met for a brief second. Daniel gave a small nod. Miller returned it, expression calm, but his eyes carried understanding. Two men who had once faced each other in fear now stood in quiet respect. As Daniel walked away, the world seemed peaceful again. He had found closure, and Miller had proven what true honor looked like, not loud, not forceful, but steady and human. In the end, people didn't just remember the day a gun was pulled at the tomb. They remember how it ended, not in tragedy, but in grace. They remember how one guard's voice carried more power than any weapon. The story became a quiet legend among soldiers. New recruits heard it during their first days of training. It was told not as a tale of danger, but as a story of restraint, faith, and the quiet strength of a man who believed in peace. Years later, when Miller retired, the ceremony for his final walk was attended by hundreds. Veterans, families, and even some of the people who had been there that day came to honor him. Daniel sent a letter again, this time saying, You didn't just guard a tomb. You guarded hope, as Miller took his last 21 steps before the tomb of the unknown soldier. The same calm silence filled the air. Every eye watched with respect. The sound of his final click on the marble echoed through the plaza. He turned, saluted, and walked away, his duty complete. The world outside was still full of noise and chaos, but inside that place, there was peace. And in that peace lived the memory of the day when courage wore calm eyes and spoke softly. And even a lost soul found redemption in the shadow of honor.